I opened my eyes to another beautiful morning, sunlight streaming through our bedroom window. As I stretched and yawned, I couldn't help but smile at the sight of Ethan, my husband of 5 years, still peacefully asleep beside me. His dark hair was tousled, and there was a hint of stubble on his chiseled jaw. I resisted the urge to run my fingers through his hair, not wanting to wake him just yet. Instead, I slipped out of bed and padded quietly to the kitchen to start the coffee maker. As I waited for the rich aroma to fill our apartment, I reflected on how lucky I felt. At 29, I had a fulfilling career as a journalist, a beautiful home, and a loving husband who supported me in everything I did. I heard Ethan stirring just as the coffee finished brewing. Perfect timing, as always. I poured 2 mugs and carried them back to the bedroom, where I found him sitting up and rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Good morning, handsome," I said, handing him a steaming cup. "Sleep well?" He gave me that crooked smile that still made my heart skip a beat. "Always do with you by my side, Liv." We sipped our coffee in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Ethan spoke again. "Hey, I was thinking, why don't we have dinner at that new Italian place tonight, to celebrate?" I raised an eyebrow. "Celebrate what? Do we need a reason?" he asked with a wink. "But if you insist, how about celebrating us? And maybe some good news I got at work yesterday." My curiosity was piqued. "Oh, what kind of good news?" Ethan's eyes lit up with excitement. "Remember that big commercial project I've been hoping to land? Well, it looks like it might be happening. I have a meeting with a potential new client today to discuss the details." I set my mug down and threw my arms around him, not caring that some coffee sloshed onto the sheets. "Ethan, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you." He laughed and hugged me back tightly. "Thanks, babe. I couldn't have done it without your support." As we got ready for work, I couldn't stop smiling. Ethan had been working so hard to grow his architecture firm, and it was wonderful to see his efforts paying off. I knew how much this project meant to him. Before we left, I grabbed his hand and pulled him close for a kiss. "Good luck with your meeting today. You're going to knock their socks off." He grinned and gave me another quick peck. "Thanks, Liv. Have a great day yourself. Maybe you can swing by the shelter on your lunch break and see how that story is coming along." I nodded, touched that he remembered the piece I was working on about a local animal rescue. It was moments like these that reminded me why I fell in love with Ethan in the first place. He was always so thoughtful and supportive of my work. As I watched him drive away, I felt a surge of gratitude for the life we'd built together. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but I truly believed we were stronger than ever. I had no idea then how quickly everything was about to change. I spent the morning at the office, working on research for my latest article. Around lunchtime, I decided to take Ethan's suggestion and visit the animal shelter. As I walked in, I was greeted by a chorus of barks and meows. "Olivia, so good to see you again." Sarah, the shelter manager, called out, "Are you here to check on your story?" I nodded, smiling. "And maybe to get some puppy cuddles, if I'm being honest." Sarah laughed. "Well, you're in luck. We just got a new litter of rescues in yesterday. Want to see them?" For the next hour, I alternated between taking notes for my article and playing with the adorable puppies. As I held a tiny black lab mix, I couldn't help but imagine bringing him home to surprise Ethan. We talked about getting a dog someday, and I knew Ethan would fall in love with this little guy instantly. On impulse, I decided to fill out an adoption application. It would be the perfect way to celebrate Ethan's new project, and I knew he'd be thrilled. As I left the shelter, my heart felt full. I couldn't wait for our dinner that night, to share the good news about the potential new addition to our family. Little did I know that dinner would mark the beginning of the end of the life I thought I knew. I couldn't wait for our dinner date that night. I spent extra time getting ready, putting on my favorite dress and the perfume Ethan had given me for our anniversary. When I walked into the living room, Ethan's eyes lit up. "Wow, Liv, you look stunning," he said, giving me a kiss on the cheek. Thanks, honey. You clean up pretty well yourself, I teased, straightening his tie. The restaurant was beautiful, with soft lighting and the aroma of garlic and herbs filling the air. As we settled into our booth, Ethan ordered a bottle of champagne. So, tell me more about this new client, I said, eager to hear about his exciting news. Ethan's face brightened. Well, it's a big commercial project downtown. The client wants to revitalize an old building, turn it into a mix of office spaces and high-end apartments. It's exactly the kind of challenge I've been hoping for. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. That's fantastic, Ethan. You've worked so hard for this. He nodded. But I noticed a flicker of something in his eyes. Nervousness. But why would he be nervous about good news? Yeah, it's a great opportunity, he said, taking a long sip of champagne. The client is, well, they're very particular. It might mean some long hours for a while. I tried to ignore the slight pang in my chest. We were both ambitious in our careers, and sometimes that meant sacrificing time together, but it was always temporary. We'll make it work, I assured him. I'm just so proud of you. The rest of the dinner was lovely, filled with good food and easy conversation. But as we were finishing our dessert, I noticed Ethan checking his phone more frequently. Everything okay? I asked. He looked up, startled. Oh, yeah, just checking on some details for tomorrow's meeting. I nodded, but something felt off. Ethan was usually so present during our date nights, always insisting we put our phones away to focus on each other. On the drive home, I decided to share my own exciting news. So, I have a little surprise for you too, I said, unable to keep the grin off my face. Oh yeah, Ethan glanced at me, curious. Well, you know how we've talked about getting a dog someday? I visited the shelter today for my story, and there's this adorable little lab mix puppy. I put in an adoption application. I thought maybe we could go see him together this weekend. I expected Ethan to be thrilled. We'd talked about getting a dog for years, but instead, he gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white. Liv, I don't think now is a good time for a dog, he said slowly. With this new project, I'm going to be working crazy hours. It wouldn't be fair to the puppy. My heart sank. Oh, I guess I didn't think about that. I just thought you'd be excited, Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, babe. It's a sweet idea, really. Maybe in a few months when things settle down. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. Sure, of course. You're right. It makes sense to wait. When we got home, Ethan headed straight for the shower. As I was hanging up my dress, I noticed a faint, unfamiliar scent on his shirt. It wasn't my perfume. And it definitely wasn't Ethan's usual cologne. I brought the fabric to my nose, inhaling deeply. It was definitely a woman's perfume, floral, with a hint of vanilla. My stomach twisted. There had to be a logical explanation, right? Maybe it was from a colleague who had hugged him to congratulate him on the new project. Or perhaps he'd been in a crowded elevator. I tried to push away the nagging doubt creeping into my mind. Later that night, as we lay in bed, Ethan seemed distracted. He was on his phone again, the blue light illuminating his face in the darkness. Everything okay? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He quickly put the phone down. Yeah, just setting my alarm. Early meeting tomorrow. I snuggled closer to him, seeking reassurance. I love you, Ethan. There was a slight pause before he replied, Love you too, Liv. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The perfume, the constant phone checking, the hesitation in his voice, they were all small things, easily explained away. But together, they planted a tiny seed of doubt in my mind. I told myself I was being paranoid. Ethan and I had been happy for years. We had a good life, a strong marriage. One off night and a few odd behaviors didn't mean anything. Did they? Little did I know, this was just the beginning. Those small, easily dismissed signs would soon grow into something I couldn't ignore, no matter how much I wanted to. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ethan threw himself into his new project, often coming home late and leaving early. I tried to be supportive, reminding myself that this was a big opportunity for him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One evening, I decided to surprise Ethan at his office with takeout from his favorite Thai place. As I approached his building, I saw him walking out with a woman I didn't recognize. She was stunning, tall, with long blonde hair and legs for days. They were laughing about something, and I saw Ethan touch her arm in a way that seemed a bit too familiar. My heart raced as I ducked behind a nearby car, not wanting them to see me. I watched as they said goodbye, the woman giving Ethan a quick hug before getting into a taxi. Ethan stood there for a moment, watching the taxi drive away with a smile on his face. I waited until he went back inside before I left, the Thai food forgotten in my hands. My mind was spinning. Who was she? Why hadn't Ethan mentioned working closely with a woman on this project? When I got home, I tried to push the incident out of my mind. Maybe she was just a colleague. Maybe I was reading too much into a friendly interaction, but the image of Ethan's hand on her arm kept replaying in my head. That night, when Ethan came home, I casually asked about his days. "Oh, you know, the usual," he said, shrugging off his jacket. "Lots of meetings, going over blueprints. Nothing exciting." I bit my lip, debating whether to mention what I'd seen. In the end, I chickened out. "Sounds exhausting. Want me to heat up some leftovers for you?" He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thanks, babe, but I grabbed a bite with the team earlier. I think I'm just going to hit the shower and crash." As he headed to the bathroom, I noticed him slip his phone out of his pocket and take it with him, something he'd never done before. The doubt in my stomach grew a little stronger. The next day at work, I couldn't focus on my articles. I kept thinking about Ethan and that woman. Had there been other signs I'd missed? I thought back to the night of our dinner, the unfamiliar perfume on his shirt. At the time, I dismissed it, but now I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. This was ridiculous. Ethan and I had been together for years. We were happy, weren't we? But as the days went on, I couldn't ignore the changes in Ethan's behavior. He was always on his phone, angling the screen away from me when I walked by. He started taking more business calls in the other room, his voice low and secretive, and the late nights at the office became more and more frequent. One night, as we lay in bed, I decided to broach the subject. "Ethan," I said softly, "is everything okay with us?" He turned to look at me, his brow furrowed. "Of course it is. Why would you ask that?" I took a deep breath. "It's just, you've been so distant lately. I feel like we hardly see each other anymore." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry, Liv. This project is just really demanding. I promise it'll calm down soon." I wanted to believe him, but something in his eyes made me doubt his words. Still, I nodded and tried to smile. "Okay, I just miss you, that's all." He leaned over and kissed me on the forehead. "I miss you too. How about we plan a weekend getaway soon, just the two of us?" The suggestion lifted my spirits a little. That sounds perfect. But as the weeks went by, that weekend getaway never materialized. Ethan always had an excuse, a deadline, a meeting, a client emergency. And with each broken promise, my doubts grew stronger. I started paying more attention to the little things. The way Ethan would smile at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, the extra cologne he started wearing to work, the mysterious charges on our credit card bill for restaurants I knew we hadn't been to together. One afternoon, I was doing laundry when I found a crumpled receipt in Ethan's pocket. It was for a woman's bracelet from an expensive jewelry store downtown. My birthday had passed months ago, and our anniversary wasn't for several more months. Who was the bracelet for? I stood there, holding the receipt, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. I wanted to confront Ethan, to demand answers, but a part of me was terrified of what those answers might be. That night, As I lay awake listening to Ethan's steady breathing beside me, I made a decision. I couldn't go on like this, constantly wondering and doubting. I needed to know the truth one way or another. Tomorrow, I would start digging deeper. I'd use every skill I had as a journalist to uncover what Ethan was hiding. Because one thing was becoming painfully clear. The man sleeping next to me was no longer the Ethan I thought I knew. As I finally drifted off to sleep, a single tear slipped down my cheek. I had no idea how much my world was about to change, or how strong I would need to be to face what was coming. The next morning, I woke up with a pit in my stomach. Ethan had already left for work, leaving nothing but a hastily scrawled note on the kitchen counter. Early meeting, might be late tonight, love you. I stared at the note, tracing my finger over the words, love you. Did he really mean it anymore? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to do. It felt wrong, invasive even. But I needed answers. I started with Ethan's laptop. He usually kept it password protected, but I knew he sometimes forgot to log out. My heart raced as I opened it, relief washing over me when I saw his desktop. I clicked on his email, scanning through his inbox. Most of it was work-related, nothing suspicious. But then I noticed a folder labeled Personal Project. My hand shook slightly as I clicked on it. Inside were several emails from someone named Sophia. The most recent one caught my eye. Can't wait to see you later. Same place as usual. XO. My throat tightened. I wanted to read more, but I heard my phone buzz. It was a text from my boss, reminding me about a staff meeting. Reluctantly, I closed the laptop and left for work, my mind swirling with questions. At the office, I could barely focus. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, half expecting it to be Ethan confessing everything. But it never was. During my lunch break, I decided to do some digging into this Sophia person. I'm not proud of it, but I used some of my investigative journalism skills to search for her online. It didn't take long to find her. Sophia Reynolds, a successful interior designer who often collaborated with architects on big projects. My heart sank as I looked at her profile picture. She was gorgeous, with long blonde hair and a dazzling smile. Was this the woman I'd seen Ethan with outside his office? I scrolled through her social media, looking for any connection to Ethan. And there it was, a photo from a charity gala 2 weeks ago. In the background, I could clearly see Ethan, laughing and holding a glass of champagne. He'd told me he was working late that night. I felt sick to my stomach. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? When I got home that evening, the apartment was still empty. I paced around, debating what to do next. Should I confront Ethan, wait for more evidence? I felt lost, unsure of how to proceed. In a moment of desperation, I decided to check Ethan's call logs. I knew his phone password, or at least I thought I did. But when I tried to unlock it, it didn't work. He'd changed it. Another red flag. I sat on our bed, holding his phone, feeling like my whole world was crumbling around me. That's when I noticed something odd about Ethan's nightstand. The drawer was slightly ajar, something he never allowed. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it fully. Inside, tucked under some papers, was a small velvet box. My heart raced as I opened it, expecting to find the bracelet from the receipt. Instead, there was a beautiful pair of diamond earrings. Definitely not my style. I rarely wore fancy jewelry. Were these for Sophia? I heard the front door open and quickly shoved the box back in the drawer. Ethan called out, "Liv, you home?" I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. "In the bedroom," I called back, my voice shaky. Ethan appeared in the doorway, looking tired but smiling. "Hey babe, how was your day?" I forced a smile. "Fine, busy. How about yours?" He shrugged. "Same old, lots of meetings. You know how it is." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask him about Sophia and the earrings and all the lies. But I held back. I needed more proof before I confronted him. "I'm gonna grab a shower," Ethan said, loosening his tie. "Want to order in tonight? I'm beat." "Sure." I managed to say. As soon as I heard the shower running, I let out a shaky breath. What was I going to do? That night, as Ethan slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing. I thought back to all the happy moments we'd shared, the life we'd built together. How could it all have gone so wrong? I realized then that I couldn't just sit back and watch my marriage crumble. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Tomorrow, I decided, I would take my investigation to the next level. I'd follow Ethan, see where he really went during these late nights at the office. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I felt a mix of determination and dread. I had no idea what I would discover, but I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. Ethan had already left for work, and I called in sick to the office. Today was the day I'd follow him and hopefully get some answers. I spent the morning trying to distract myself, cleaning the apartment and working on an article. But my mind kept drifting back to Ethan, to Sophia, to the earrings in the drawer. By the time afternoon rolled around, I was a bundle of nerves. At 5 p.m., I parked my car across the street from Ethan's office building. My palms were sweaty as I gripped the steering wheel, watching the entrance intently. An hour passed, then 2. Just as I was starting to think this was a waste of time, I saw him. Ethan walked out, looking around before heading down the street. I waited a moment before following, keeping a safe distance. He turned a corner and entered a small Italian restaurant. My heart sank as I saw him greet someone at a table, a woman with long blonde hair. Sophia. I parked nearby and watched through the window. They were laughing, talking animatedly. At one point, Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. I felt sick. After what felt like hours, they finally left the restaurant. I followed them to a nearby park, where they sat on a bench, still deep in conversation. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language spoke volumes. They were sitting close, their knees touching. Just as I was about to leave, unable to watch anymore, something unexpected happened. Sophia pulled out a large folder and spread some papers on the bench between them. They started pointing at different parts, discussing something that looked like blueprints. I frowned, confused. This didn't look like a romantic rendezvous anymore. It looked like work. Could I have been wrong about everything? Feeling a mix of relief and embarrassment, I decided to head home. As I turned to leave, I accidentally knocked over a trash can, causing a loud clatter. Ethan and Sophia looked up, startled. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought Ethan had seen me. But then they went back to their discussion, and I hurried away, my cheeks burning. When I got home, I felt like a fool. How could I have jumped to such conclusions? I'd let my imagination run wild, nearly destroying my trust in Ethan over what was probably just a work project. Later that night, Ethan came home, looking tired but happy. "Hey, Liv," he said, giving me a kiss. "How are you feeling?" "Better." I nodded, guilt gnawing at me. "Much better. How was your day?" He smiled. "Actually, really good. We made a breakthrough on the project. I think we're finally getting somewhere." I forced a smile. "That's great, honey. I'm so proud of you." As Ethan showered, I sat on our bed, feeling conflicted. I was relieved that my suspicions seemed unfounded, but I also felt ashamed of my behavior. How could I have doubted Ethan like that? But then, as I was about to get ready for bed myself, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There, on the collar of Ethan's discarded shirt, was a smudge of red lipstick. My mind raced. Sophia had been wearing red lipstick at the restaurant, but they had just been working, right? Why would there be lipstick on his collar? I picked up the shirt, examining it closer. That's when I noticed the scent, the same floral perfume I'd smelled weeks ago. My hands shook as I held the fabric to my nose, inhaling deeply to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Just then, Ethan walked out of the bathroom, a towel around his waist. He froze when he saw me holding his shirt. "Liv, "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice tight. I looked up at him, tears in my eyes. "Ethan, what's going on? And don't tell me it's nothing. I can smell her perfume. I can see the lipstick on your collar." Ethan's face paled. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, seemingly at a loss for words. "I saw you today," I continued, my voice shaking. "With Sophia. At the restaurant. And then at the park. I thought maybe I was wrong about everything, that it was just work. But this..." I held up the shirt. "This isn't work, Ethan. What's really going on?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. "Liv, it's not what you think. Sophia and we're just..." "Don't you dare say, just friends," I interrupted, anger bubbling up inside me. "Friends don't leave lipstick on each other's collars." Ethan stepped towards me, his hands outstretched. "Please, let me explain. It's complicated." I stepped back, shaking my head. "No, Ethan, it's not complicated. It's actually very simple. You're either being faithful to me or you're not. And right now, all the evidence is pointing to not." Ethan's face crumpled. "Liv, please, I love you. You have to believe me." But as I looked at him, all I could see were the lies, the late nights, the secretive phone calls. How could I believe anything he said anymore? "I think you should sleep on the couch tonight," I said quietly, turning away from him. "We'll talk in the morning." As I heard Ethan gather some things and leave the room, I collapsed onto the bed, tears streaming down my face. I'd wanted answers, and now I had them, but they weren't the ones I'd hoped for. That night, as I tossed and turned, unable to sleep, I realized that my world had indeed changed. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? I barely slept that night, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. When the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I dragged myself out of bed, feeling hollow and exhausted. Ethan was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. He looked as tired as I felt. When he saw me, he stood up, his eyes pleading. "Liv, can we talk?" he asked softly. I nodded, too drained to argue. We sat across from each other, the tension thick between us. "I'm so sorry," Ethan began. "You're right, I haven't been completely honest with you, but it's not what you think." I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Then what is it, Ethan? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot like you're having an affair." He shook his head vehemently. "No, I swear it's not that. Sophia and we're working on a secret project together. It's a big deal, potentially career-changing for both of us. We didn't want anyone to know until it was finalized." I wanted to believe him, but the doubt gnawed at me. "Sis, and the lipstick, the perfume?" Ethan sighed. "We had a celebratory drink last night. Sophia hugged me. That's all. I swear. Liv, nothing happened." As much as I wanted to trust him, something still felt off. "Why all the secrecy, Ethan? Why couldn't you just tell me about this project?" He looked down, fidgeting with his coffee mug. I wanted it to be a surprise. If it works out, it could mean big things for us. A promotion, maybe even our own firm someday." I sat back, processing his words. It sounded plausible, but years of investigative journalism had taught me to dig deeper. "Show me," I said suddenly. Ethan looked up, confused. "What?" "Show me the project. If it's just work, you should be able to show me what you've been doing, right?" He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. Yeah, let me get my laptop." As Ethan pulled up files and explained the project, I listened carefully, looking for any inconsistencies. It did seem like a legitimate work project, a revolutionary design for a sustainable, multi-use building complex. But something still nagged at me. "What about the earrings?" I asked abruptly. Ethan froze. "What earrings?" "The ones in your nightstand drawer. Don't try to deny it, Ethan. I saw them." He closed his eyes. I was going to give it to her when we visit next week, remember? I did remember and felt another wave of guilt, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. I want to believe you, Ethan, I said softly, but you have to understand how this all looks. The secret meetings, the late nights, the lipstick. Ethan reached across the table, taking my hand. I know, and I'm so sorry. I never meant to make you doubt me. I love you, Liv. Only you. I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception, but all I saw was sincerity and regret. Okay, I said finally. I believe you, but no more secrets, all right? We're supposed to be partners in everything. He nodded eagerly. Absolutely, I promise. From now on, total honesty. We spent the rest of the day talking, clearing the air. Ethan showed me more details of the project, and I had to admit it was impressive. By evening, I felt like a weight had been lifted. Maybe I had overreacted after all, but as I lay in bed that night, Ethan's arm draped over me, I couldn't shake a lingering doubt. Something still felt off. I thought back to my journalism training, to all the times a story seemed perfect on the surface but had hidden depths. I made a decision then. I would give Ethan the benefit of the doubt, but I wouldn't stop investigating. If he was telling the truth, I'd find nothing and could put this whole mess behind us. But if there was more to the story, I turned over, looking at Ethan's peaceful sleeping face. I hoped with all my heart that I was wrong, that my suspicions were unfounded. But I knew I couldn't rest until I uncovered the whole truth, whatever it might be. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind set on a new plan. I'd use every skill I had as a journalist to dig deeper. I'd check property records, business filings, anything that could corroborate or disprove Ethan's story about this secret project. As I sipped my coffee, watching the sunrise, I steeled myself for what was to come. One way or another, I would get to the bottom of this. Because if there's one thing I've learned in my career, it's that the truth always comes out in the end. The next few days were a whirlwind of investigation. I threw myself into uncovering every detail I could about Ethan's supposed secret project. I scoured public records, business filings, and property databases. I even reached out to some of my contacts in the architecture world, carefully probing for information without raising suspicion. At first, everything seemed to check out. There were indeed plans filed for a new sustainable building complex, matching what Ethan had shown me. Sophia's name was listed as a collaborator on several documents. It all looked legitimate. But then I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. While combing through Ethan's email history, I'm not proud of it, but I had to know. I found a series of messages between him and Sophia that didn't quite fit the narrative of a purely professional relationship. Can't wait for our business trip next month, one email from Sophia read. I booked us the usual room. My hands shook as I scrolled through more messages. They were careful, never explicitly mentioning anything beyond work, but the undertones were unmistakable. References to inside jokes, late-night brainstorming sessions, and plans for weekend site visits that seemed suspiciously like romantic getaways. I felt sick to my stomach. Had Ethan been playing me this whole time? Was the entire project just an elaborate cover for their affair? Determined to find concrete proof, I decided to take a risk. I knew Ethan had a meeting scheduled with Sophia that afternoon. Instead of following him like last time, I went to his office, claiming I wanted to surprise him with lunch. His assistant, looking flustered, told me he was out at a client meeting. I pretended to be disappointed, then casually asked if I could wait in his office. She hesitated, but eventually agreed, probably not wanting to turn away the boss's wife. Once inside, I started searching. I'm not sure what I expected to find, a love letter, maybe, or more incriminating emails. What I discovered was far worse. Hidden in a locked drawer. Thank you, journalism skills, for teaching me how to pick simple locks. I found a small velvet box. My heart raced as I opened it, expecting to see the earrings I'd discovered earlier. Instead, I found a delicate gold necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. Engraved on the back were the words, "To S, all my love, E." I stared at the necklace, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. This wasn't a work gift. This wasn't something you gave to a colleague or even a close friend. This was a lover's gift. Just then, I heard voices approaching the office. In a panic, I shoved the necklace back in the drawer and barely managed to compose myself before Ethan walked in, Sophia right behind him. The look of shock on Ethan's face would have been comical if the situation weren't so heartbreaking. "Liv, what are you doing here?" I forced a smile, my heart pounding. "I thought I'd surprise you with lunch, but your assistant said you were in a meeting. I was just about to leave." I turned to Sophia, extending my hand. "You must be Sophia. I've heard so much about you and your project." Sophia shook my hand, looking uncomfortable. "Nice to meet you, Olivia. Ethan talks about you all the time." "I bet he does," I thought bitterly. Aloud, I said, "Oh well, I should get going. You two probably have work to do." I kissed Ethan on the cheek, whispering, "See you at home, honey." As I walked out of the office, I could feel their eyes on my back. I managed to hold it together until I got to my car, then broke down in tears. All the pieces were falling into place now. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the changes in Ethan's behavior. It all pointed to one undeniable truth. My husband was having an affair. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. What was I going to do? Confront Ethan? Leave him? Try to save our marriage? I felt lost, betrayed, and utterly alone. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on our balcony, staring out at the city. I thought about all the years Ethan and I had spent together, all the dreams we'd shared. How could he throw it all away? As the sun set, casting long shadows across the room, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Ethan yet. I needed more time to think, to plan my next move, and I needed irrefutable proof, something he couldn't explain away or deny. I wiped away my tears and took a deep breath. The journalist in me knew that emotions could cloud judgment. I needed to approach this logically, gather all the facts before making any decisions. I spent the rest of the evening creating a plan. I'd document everything, the emails, the mysterious meetings, the gift. I'd follow Ethan more carefully, gathering photographic evidence if possible, and I'd dig deeper into Sophia's background, see if there was anything in her past that might shed light on the situation. When Ethan came home that night, I pretended everything was normal. I smiled, asked about his day, even managed to eat dinner with him without letting on that my world was crumbling. As we got ready for bed, Ethan hugged me from behind, kissing my neck. "I love you, Liv," he murmured. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. "I love you too," I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. That night, as Ethan slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, my mind churning. I knew the coming days would be challenging, possibly the hardest of my life. But I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be, because one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days were a blur of investigation and heartache. I threw myself into gathering evidence, determined to have an airtight case before confronting Ethan. I followed him discreetly, documenting his meetings with Sophia. I dug deeper into their emails, uncovering more suggestive messages. I even hired a private investigator to track their movements when I couldn't. It was during one of my own stakeouts that I got the final piece of evidence I needed. I watched from my car as Ethan and Sophia left a restaurant, hand in hand. They stopped under a streetlight, and my heart shattered as I saw Ethan pull out the necklace I'd found in his office drawer. He fastened it around Sophia's neck, then pulled her in for a passionate kiss. With shaking hands, I snapped several photos. There it was, undeniable proof of Ethan's infidelity. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling with what I'd just witnessed. When I got home, I spread all the evidence out on our dining room table, the emails, the photos, the receipts for gifts he'd bought her. I sat there staring at the remnants of my shattered marriage until I heard Ethan's key in the lock. He walked in, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Hey, Liv! I didn't expect you to be up. I had to work late again, but His voice trailed off as he took in the scene before him. The smile faded from his face, replaced by a look of shock and then, slowly, resignation. "Liv," he said softly. "I can explain." I laughed bitterly. "Explain. Go ahead, Ethan. Explain how you've been lying to me for months. Explain how you've been sneaking around with Sophia behind my back. Explain this." I held up the photo of their kiss, and Ethan's face crumpled. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I never meant for this to happen." "But it did happen," I said, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "You chose to lie to me, to betray me. Was any of it real, the project, the late nights? Was it all just a cover for your affair?" Ethan looked up, his eyes pleading. "No, the project is real. It started out as just work, I swear. But then Sophia and we got close. One thing led to another, and you decided to throw away our entire marriage." I finished for him. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Liv, please, I love you. We can work this out." I stood up, putting distance between us. "Love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied to my face day after day." "I do love you," Ethan insisted. "I made a terrible mistake, but I want to make it right. Please, give me another chance." I looked at him, really looked at him, the man I'd loved for years, the man I thought I knew better than anyone. Now, he was a stranger to me. "How long?" I asked quietly. Ethan hesitated. 6 months, he finally admitted. 6 months? Half a year of lies, of betrayal. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "I want you out," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Pack your things and leave. Tonight." "Liv, please," Ethan begged, tears in his eyes. "Let's talk about this. We can go to counseling, work things out." I shook my head. "There's nothing to work out, Ethan. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." As Ethan packed his bags, I sat on our bed, my bed now, feeling numb. When he was done, he stood in the doorway, looking lost. "I really am sorry, Liv," he said softly. "I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at him. This man who had been my whole world. "But you did hurt me, Ethan, more than you could ever understand." With that, he was gone. I heard the front door close and then silence. Overwhelming, deafening silence. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the wall. My mind was a whirlwind of memories. Our first date, our wedding day, all the little moments that had made up our life together. How could it all have been a lie? As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I finally moved. I went to the kitchen, made a cup of coffee, and sat on the balcony. Looking out at the city waking up, I felt empty, lost. But as I watched the sunrise, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold, I felt something else stirring inside me. A tiny spark of determination, of strength. Yes, Ethan had betrayed me. Yes, my heart was broken. But I was still here, still standing, and I refused to let his actions define me or my future. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill my lungs. This wasn't the end, I realized. It was a new beginning. A chance to rediscover who I was without Ethan, to build a life on my own terms. It wouldn't be easy. I knew there would be days when the pain would feel overwhelming, when I'd question everything, but I also knew I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. As I finished my coffee, I made a promise to myself. I would get through this. I would heal, grow, and come out stronger on the other side. Because while Ethan might have broken my heart, he hadn't broken me. This was my story now, and I was determined to make it a good one. The days following Ethan's departure were a blur of pain and confusion. I moved through our apartment, now just mine, like a ghost. touching familiar objects that suddenly felt alien. Every corner held a memory, every photograph a reminder of the life I thought we had. I called in sick to work, unable to face the world just yet. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from Ethan, begging for another chance, swearing he'd make things right. I ignored them all, each one feeling like a fresh wound. On the third day, I finally dragged myself out of bed and into the shower. As the hot water washed over me, I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. It was the first time I'd really let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. After my cry, I felt not better, exactly, but clearer. I looked at myself in the steamy mirror, eyes red and puffy, and made a decision I couldn't hide forever. It was time to face the world. I called my boss, explaining that I was going through a personal crisis and needed some time off. She was understanding, telling me to take as long as I needed. I was grateful for her kindness, but also felt a pang of shame. I'd always prided myself on my professionalism, and now here I was, falling apart. The next few weeks were a roller coaster. Some days, I felt almost normal, going through the motions of my daily routine. Other days, the grief hit me like a tidal wave, leaving me gasping for air. I started seeing a therapist, pouring out my heart in her quiet office. She listened patiently as I recounted every detail of Ethan's betrayal, every moment of doubt and pain. "What you're feeling is normal," she assured me. "You're grieving not just the end of your marriage, but the future you thought you'd have." Her words helped, but the pain was still there, a constant ache in my chest. I found myself questioning everything. Had any of it been real? Had Ethan ever truly loved me? How could I have been so blind? One night, unable to sleep, I pulled out our wedding album. I flipped through the pages, looking at our smiling faces, the love shining in our eyes. It had been real then, hadn't it? Or had it all been a lie from the very beginning? As I stared at a photo of us cutting the cake, a sudden wave of anger washed over me. I slammed the album shut and threw it across the room, watching with satisfaction as it hit the wall with a loud thud. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The sadness was still there, but now it was tinged with anger. Anger at Ethan for betraying me, yes, but also anger at myself for letting him have this much power over me. I got up and started pacing the apartment, my mind racing. Why was I letting this destroy me? I was a successful journalist, a strong, independent woman. I'd built a life for myself long before Ethan came along. Why was I acting like I couldn't go on without him? With a sudden burst of energy, I started cleaning. I scrubbed the kitchen until it sparkled, organized my closet, and rearranged the living room furniture. As I worked, I felt a small spark of something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. The next morning, I woke up feeling different, not happy exactly, but more alive than I'd felt since that fateful night. I made myself a proper breakfast, put on some makeup, and actually styled my hair. As I was about to leave for a walk, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. "Liv, please talk to me. I miss you so much. We can fix this. I know we can." I stared at the message, feeling a familiar ache in my chest. But this time, it was accompanied by something else: resolve. I took a deep breath and typed out a response. "There's nothing to fix, Ethan. It's over. Please don't contact me again." With shaking hands, I hit send, then blocked his number. It felt like cutting off a limb, but also like setting myself free. As I walked through the park near my apartment, I found myself noticing things I hadn't in weeks. The vibrant colors of the flowers, the laughter of children playing, the warmth of the sun on my skin. The world was still turning. Life was still happening all around me. For the first time since that night, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could get through this. Maybe I could rebuild my life, create a new future for myself. But as I sat on a park bench, watching a couple walk by hand in hand, the doubt crept back in. How could I ever trust anyone again? How could I open myself up to love when all it had brought me was pain? I closed my eyes. taking deep breaths to calm my racing thoughts. This was going to be a long journey, I realized. There would be good days and bad days, moments of strength and moments of weakness. As I walked home, I made a promise to myself. I would take it one day at a time. I would focus on healing, on rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. And maybe, someday, I would find the strength to love again. But for now, it was enough to just keep moving forward, to wake up each morning and face the day no matter how hard it might be. Because while Ethan had broken my heart, he hadn't broken my spirit. And that, I was beginning to realize, was the most important thing of all. As weeks turned into months, I slowly began to find my footing in this new, Ethan-less reality. The pain was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it no longer consumed my every waking moment. I'd returned to work, throwing myself into my journalism with renewed vigor. My colleagues were supportive, tactfully avoiding any mention of Ethan or my changed relationship status. One morning, as I was researching for a new article, I stumbled upon something that made my heart race. It was a small news item about a local architecture firm facing allegations of unethical practices. The firm, none other than Ethan and Sophia's. I dug deeper, my journalistic instincts kicking into high gear. It seemed their revolutionary, sustainable building project wasn't as eco-friendly as they'd claimed. There were whispers of cut corners, ignored safety regulations, and greased palms to push the project through. For a moment, I hesitated. Did I really want to get involved in this? But then I remembered all the lies, all the pain Ethan had caused me, and I made a decision. I would investigate this story, not for revenge, but because it was the right thing to do. Because it was my job as a journalist to uncover the truth. I spent the next few weeks immersed in the investigation. I interviewed whistleblowers, pored over building plans, and followed paper trails. Each new piece of evidence felt like a small victory, a step towards reclaiming my power. As I worked, I felt a change coming over me. The fog of depression that had clouded my mind for so long began to lift. I was Olivia Chen, investigative journalist. I was strong, capable, and I had a purpose. Finally, after weeks of hard work, I had enough evidence to write my exposé. I sat at my computer, fingers flying over the keyboard as I crafted the article that would blow the lid off Ethan and Sophia's corrupt project. As I wrote, I realized something. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. It was about doing my job, about standing up for what was right. For the first time in months, I felt truly alive. The day my article was published, I braced myself for the fallout. It came swiftly. The story was picked up by major news outlets, and suddenly, Ethan and Sophia's faces were splashed across every screen in the city. I watched from afar as their carefully constructed world crumbled. The project was halted pending investigation. Their firm was under scrutiny. And Ethan? Well, let's just say his star wasn't shining quite so brightly anymore. Part of me expected to feel satisfaction, even joy at their downfall. But instead, I felt peace. I'd done my job, told the truth, and now I could move on. In the weeks that followed, my life took an unexpected turn. I was offered a promotion at work, recognition for my groundbreaking story. I started giving talks at journalism schools about investigative reporting and ethical practices in the industry. One evening, as I was preparing for one of these talks, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me. She looked strong, confident, her eyes bright with purpose. When had that happened? I thought back to those dark days after Ethan left, how lost and broken I'd felt. If someone had told me then that I'd be where I am now, I wouldn't have believed them. But here I was, not just surviving, but thriving. I'd taken my pain and turned it into fuel, propelling myself forward into a life I never could have imagined. As I stood on the stage that night, looking out at a sea of eager young faces, I felt a surge of gratitude for the strength I'd found within myself, for the support of my friends and colleagues, even gratitude for the pain that had led me here. Life doesn't always go as planned, I told the audience. Sometimes the things that break us are the very things that make us stronger. The key is to never stop fighting, never stop believing in yourself. After the talk, a young woman approached me, her eyes shining with admiration. "Ms. Chen," she said, "your story is so inspiring. How did you find the courage to keep going when everything fell apart?" I smiled, thinking back to those dark days. "One day at a time," I said softly. "You just keep putting one foot in front of the other, even when you can't see the path ahead. And eventually, you look up and realize you've climbed a mountain." As I drove home that night, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Yes, Ethan had broken my heart, but in doing so, he'd set me free. Free to discover my own strength, to chase my dreams, to become the woman I was always meant to be. I thought about the future stretching out before me, full of possibilities. Maybe someday I'd find love again. Maybe I wouldn't. But I knew now that I didn't need a man to complete me. I was whole, all on my own. As I climbed into bed that night, I smiled to myself. Life had thrown me a curveball, but I'd knocked it out of the park. And whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I was ready to face them. Because I was Olivia Chen, survivor, fighter, and one hell of a journalist. And my story? Well, it was just beginning.